you're not allowed to see. You're not allowed to go into Area 51, but a pilot named Gabriel Ziefman broke those rules and flew over top. He took this photo in 2020 and it's the best one we have. Cameras have always been banned in the Supreme Court, but in 1932 Eric Sullivan snuck in a camera. He pretended to have a broken arm and hid his camera inside the cast. 5 years later there was another photo taken. A lady cut a hole in her purse and put a small camera in it. Since 1878 the most powerful people in the world meet at this forest in California, where they do lots of ceremonies and rituals. This includes presidents, billionaires, and business people. But a photographer named Gabriel Moulon snuck in and took a picture of them doing a ritual. 3 people who beat the system. A lady from Vancouver spotted her stolen bike for sale online. She phoned the police, but they were busy that day and couldn't help her. So she decided to call the thief and say she was interested in buying the bike. They met at McDonald's and she immediately knew that it was hers. So she asked to try it out and he agreed and she never came back. Kimberly Oakley left a note for her son Jason saying, "Can you hang this out please?" But she didn't specify what this meant. So Jason took her words more serious than she thought he would and literally hung up the note and sent her this picture. Now before I tell you about the smartest kid, I found an app that gives you these secret emojis and also a bunch of cool fonts. Just press a button on my profile to get it. Finally, this kid's mom has simple rules. No food in the living room and no technology in the kitchen. So the boy beat the system by laying in between the two. People who had one job but still failed. This person put up a sign saying give cyclists space, but it blocks off the bike lane. This person gave the baker a flash drive with the picture they wanted on the cake, but instead the baker put a picture of the flash drive. On the news they were supposed to blur out the people in the background's faces, but you could still see them perfectly fine in the mirror. This person's job is to cut the grass, but they're too lazy to move the pylon. Now before I show you the most funniest one, I found an app that scans your palm and tells you your future. Just press the button on my profile to get it. Finally, this person put a drain in the only spot that doesn't get water, so I guess it's working, right? Here's how to survive a dog attack. First, you need to stay calm and still. The reason dogs attack is because they're afraid, and they've learned that offense is their best defense. So if you yell or make lots of motion, you'll cause their fear to increase and they'll be more aggressive. The second thing is to avoid eye contact. When you stare, it scares them, and again causes them to be more aggressive. The third thing is to avoid running because it'll trigger them to chase you. Now if you think it's gonna bite you, put a purse, jacket, or any object in between you and the dog. Then use it as a shield to prevent it from getting close to you. But if the bite's unavoidable, defend yourself with one of your forearms, and use your other arm to protect your face, throat, and stomach. Once the dog is calmed down, slowly back away without turning around. And finally, after the attack, go to the emergency room to check your injuries. The scariest booby traps in the world. Punji sticks were one of the most famous booby traps used in the Vietnam War. It was made out of bamboo sticks with a sharp point at the end, which were placed in deep holes that they camouflaged so nobody could see them. The goal is that the enemy would fall into the pit and the punchy sticks would pierce them. Cartridge traps, also known as toe poppers, were bullet cartridges that were placed inside a bamboo tube and a nail which they camouflaged into the ground with the tip protruding. When stepped on, the pressure of the bullet caused it to fall on the nail, igniting the primer and exploding. Finally, when the Germans were retreating from the cities of Europe, they made sure to place expensive works of art with explosives that would go off with the slightest movement. The trick was to leave the paintings slightly tilted so that when they were straightened, they would explode. 5 animals that can kill themselves. Sometimes the horns of rams and goats grow so curved and big that they penetrate their skull, causing their death. Horses and donkeys can suffer from abnormal growth in their hooves. If their hooves aren't trimmed, they can no longer walk because of the pain, causing them to die from starvation. When turtles fall on their back, it's really hard for them to roll back over. When this happens, they usually die from too much sun, starvation, or attacks from another animal. During mating season, deers get into such aggressive fights with each other that their antlers get stuck together to the point where they can't be untied. When this happens and no one can separate them, the deer die because they're unable to eat. Finally, the deer pig is famous for its 2 upper tusks. The growth becomes so uncontrollable that it pierces the upper part of their jaw, and in some cases when they're really big, they could pierce their skull, causing their death. 5 animals that can live after death. Chickens can live without their heads as long as their brain stems aren't cut off, because most of their motor functions aren't controlled by the brain but by the brain stems. Salamanders have the ability to regenerate limbs and organs so they don't die. When they're old enough, they could regenerate again and again, even their brain, heart, and spinal cord. After a snake loses its head, it still has hours to live, so you better stay away from its head, because it can still inject you with its venom even after death. Flatworms can rebuild any part of its body after it's cut off. If they're cut in half, the head will rebuild the tail and vice versa, resulting in 2 flatworms. Cockroaches are resistant to radiation and are most likely to survive a nuclear attack. They can live after decapitation for a long time, but since they can't eat, they die of starvation. 10 10 facts you didn't know that could save your life. If your house ever smells like fish for no reason, 9 times out of 10 it's because there's an electrical fire. If you're in a foreign country and you need to call for help but you don't know the emergency number, call 112 and it'll automatically connect you to the nearest helpline. If a tornado looks like it's not moving, it's actually moving towards you. If you ever wake up to the smell of gas, don't turn on a light. A spark from the light switch could blow up your entire house. Lying flat on your back is the best way to survive a falling elevator. If your hair suddenly stands up, duck and cover because you're about to be struck by lightning. If you ever fall off the edge onto the tracks, don't try and crawl back up. There's a crawl space built to go underneath in case this happens. If a deer runs across the road, it's better to hit it than swerve into the ditch. But if it's a moose, then it's better to swerve into the ditch. Because hitting a moose is like hitting a brick wall. Even if you have no service, you can still dial 911. In an emergency, your phone will connect to the nearest tower. If you ever get kidnapped into the back of a vehicle, disconnect the brake light wire so the cops will pull them over, then kick on the door to let them know that you're there. Secret messages hidden in popular logos. In the FedEx logo, there's an arrow in between the E and the X. It stands for moving forward, speed, and precision. In the Amazon logo, there's an orange arrow that goes from A to Z, and this means they have you covered for every letter in the alphabet. In the Tostitos logo, the 2 lowercase t's represent people holding a chip, and the I is a table holding a bowl of salsa. In the Hershey's Kisses logo, the space in between the K and the I is shaped as one of their chocolates. In the Pringles logo, the dot on the I is actually a chip. The B in this logo doesn't just represent beats, but also someone wearing a pair of headphones. Genius inventions that should exist everywhere. Some elevators in Asia have giant buttons on the floor that you can kick to mark what floor you're going to. This was designed to help people who are carrying things and can't press the buttons with their hands. There's a mall that lets you leave your dog in a safe spot while you shop. The spot has a security system so that only you can open them, as well as lighting and air conditioning. In the United States, there's a shoe store that lets you test the shoes on different surfaces. The test box includes gravel, asphalt, and even materials like Lego. Finally, there's restaurants that give you a controller with 3 buttons. The first button lets the waiters know when you're ready to order, the second is to let them know when you're ready to pay, and the third one is to cancel your order. The idea is to avoid the waiters from constantly asking you if you're ready to order. Miracles people claim to have caught on tape. On Route 385 in Memphis, Tennessee, a driver lost control of his Jeep and went off the road. The car was immediately engulfed with flames. The driver escaped unharmed, but the curious thing is the police found a Bible that was untouched by the fire. It was perfectly fine even though the car was almost in ashes. In the Philippines, a little girl woke up at her funeral. Apparently she was ill and had a high fever which caused her to go into a coma. But the doctors didn't know that and declared her dead the day before her funeral. But luckily her relatives found out in time. Prahlad Yani was a Hindu ascetic who claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in over 70 years. Specialists in the scientific department put him in hospital for 15 days under 24-hour supervision and claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in those 15 days. According to the man, this can be achieved by meditation and a divine blessing. 5 things you eat that are a lie. Fruit Loops don't have any different flavors. They all taste the same, the only thing that changes is the color. Fortune cookies aren't originally from China. They were created in the United States by a Japanese man named Makoto Hagiwara, but lots of people still argue that he didn't make them. The crab meat you find in sushi is actually an imitation. It's made with finely ground white fish that's shaped, colored, and flavored to look like a crab. Pringles potato chips aren't only made of potatoes. They actually contain less than 50%, and the rest is made up with flour and cornstarch. Finally, the double stuffed Oreo cookies aren't actually double stuffed. They only have 1.92% more filling than the original cookie. Fake beggars who got caught. A man in Colombia pretended to have a leg injury so people would give him money. He collected about $200 from people driving by, but one day the police offered to help him with medical equipment but he refused. So they looked into it and it turns out he was lying. A beggar in China pretended to have 2 legs amputated. He moved around in this little vehicle where he crawled with his hands. But one day a man took off his pants to expose him and it turned out he had both legs. 5 years ago, a pregnant woman from America who begged for money every day on the streets with her child was caught after someone taking a picture of her driving a Mercedes-Benz and while she counted the money with a smile on her face. Bizarre things found in people's backyard. A man found a dinosaur bone that was 250 million years old. A couple who bought a house in California found an anti-nuclear bunker from the 1960s. It was built during the Cold War and was 4 meters underground for radiation protection. One man found human bones while doing yard work. He took them for examination and they were determined to be bones from 1,000 years ago. A man digging came across a passageway that led to the pyramids of Egypt. He dug around 30 feet down the tunnel, and archaeologists confirmed that it was a tunnel leading to Egypt's oldest pyramid. In Iowa, a family found a mammoth femur in 2010. He kept it for 16 years until it was finally examined in 2013. Scientists determined that the bone was approximately 12,000 years old and belonged to a woolly mammoth. The 3 most dangerous airplane landings. On a Myanmar Airlines flight in 2019, the plane lost its front wheels, so they were unable to land. The pilot had to do circles around the landing area to burn fuel so it would slow down the plane and make it easier to land. The plane landed with the rear wheels first, then the nose of the plane hit the ground. Everyone remembers Sully after his emergency landing on the Hudson River. 2 geese collided with the engines of the plane to make them stop working, so the pilot had no choice but to try landing in the river, which he did successfully. At an airport in South Sudan, a plane carrying 43 people caught on fire after the wing collided with a car. What happened is the pilot couldn't see the runway because of the heavy fog, so he had to make a blind landing. But fortunately, all the passengers got off safely.